Hi, I'm Carlin Borisenko. In early 2020, I was the knitting Democrat who accidentally went viral on the internet for going to a Trump rally and then left the party. I became the conservative darling, was on all the shows, traveled around the country, and then realized that conservatives were no better than Democrats. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's that both political tribes are two sides of the same coin. But it wasn't all bad. On my journey, I became obsessed with understanding the woke ideology and the culture war. I broke the story of the city of Seattle doing segregated training with its employees.
How bad has this stuff become? The city of Seattle has now put out, I'm not kidding you, this is according to Dr. Carolyn Borisenko, who's an organizational psychologist. The city of Seattle asked its white employees to voluntarily spend a day off in a training about their internalized racial superiority.
I broke the story that led to the first ever federal lawsuit against critical race theory in the schools. I broke the Coke Be Less White story, one of the biggest anti-woke stories of all time. It got over 30 million views. Coca-Cola's corporate headquarters even had to change their outgoing voicemail.
Throughout the past few days, you may have seen inaccurate reporting on the content of our recently launched diversity, equity, and inclusion training program.
I exposed the schools in Burlington, Vermont for grooming middle school children live on the internet. They called me an unwoke cult leader for that. And the Vermont Human Rights Commission slandered me publicly as being a hate channel. I even got called a hero in Breitbart for exposing that the Washington Post was writing a hit piece on Christopher Rufo. I have broken story after story after story about what's going on in the public schools, from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to autistic sex education, to the Department of Education in Michigan, literally training teachers all over the state how to groom children. I wrote a book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I host a podcast all about fighting back, and I'm downloading all of my knowledge to you on my Substack, carlin.substack.com. The world is a crazy place. We are literally surrounded by cults on all sides. On this show, we're going to do a deep dive into all aspects of the culture war, and I will show you the dark, dystopian underbellies on both sides. Here are the commitments I'll make to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts. And if you stick with me, I promise you will see the world differently. Welcome to the cult. Please mount that like button for me and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Well, hey, everyone. I do apologize for being a little bit late today, but the people who were on Spy Stream earlier might have an inkling of why I showed up late today, because we had one heck of a morning, guys. Listen, yeah, I have a new name on Twitter that I didn't even change my effing name on Twitter. We're going to talk. I don't know what happened. I didn't change my name on Twitter, but Twitter apparently sussed out that we had launched the Unwoke wiki. And it decided to change my name on my main account, and I can't change it back. Anyway, we had quite a big morning, didn't we? You know, guys, sometimes obviously we watch a lot of trainings on this channel. We watch and we don't just watch, of course, the on-demand trainings, which is what we're going to do today, but sometimes we go into trainings live and we watch them live as they happen. And you never quite know what you're going to get when it comes to a woke training. Sometimes it is the craziest thing you've ever seen in your life, and sometimes nothing happens. And there have absolutely been trainings where we go to it and we sit through the whole thing and nothing really happens, and it's not eventful, and there's no cringe, and there's no story, and it just is what it is. And so you never quite know what you're going to get when you walk into a woke training or something that we're doing live, that I'm doing as part of my journalisming. Because by some miracle, I became the real journalist when all the real journalists became activists. You never quite know what you're going to get when you're covering an event. Are they going to say something crazy? Are they not going to say something crazy? Is there going to be any story? Is it just going to be boring? But this morning, for those of you who got up early, like me, And we're on the internet by 10 a.m., which I know that 10 a.m. doesn't seem early for a lot of people, but I work until 3 or 4 in the morning, okay? 10 a.m. is very early for me. But I put on my big girl pants. I had a very large cup of coffee, and I got my ass up anyway. And I'm really glad we did, because this morning for Spy Stream, we watched a training funded by the mayor of Washington, D.C. The name of this training was Gender and Sexuality 101. And in this training, a lot of stuff happened in this training. But one of the major things, and the thing that I'm leading with, is that they had an entire section in this training in which the trainers that are being paid by the taxpayer, because this is funded by the mayor's office, the trainers literally taught people to stop using terms like mother and father and brother and sister and boys and girls and ladies and gentlemen. And yes, my favorite, I think everyone's favorite, is that we're not allowed to call our nieces and nephews anymore. Now we have to call them nibblings. Hello, nibblings. This is real. I'm going to play you guys the clip. So this morning for Spy Stream, which you can find over on the website if you want to, you can access the full stream in that file, or you can access it in this one. We went inside a live training and we saw what happened. And there are so many clips that are going to come out from this, but this is just the first one. Do you guys want to see the clip that I've released already? Let me just set up the sound just to catch up anyone who didn't feel like getting up at the crack of dawn in order to attend the training with us. Let me play you guys the clip.
So for the end of our session today, we really just want to break down, okay, we've got the terms, we're going to keep using them and be on this process. What are other things that we can do to make sure we're creating safe spaces? We'll send this to you, obviously. This, as we think about what can we do to dismantle gender spaces, gender inclusive language, right? So gendered language is everywhere. So this is very small, but husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. You may hear folks refer to their people as partners or spouses, which is a gender neutral term. Boys and girls, we can talk children's, kids, kiddos, young people, everyone, y'all, ladies and gentlemen, folks, everyone. You'll hear me use folks a lot. Just encompasses a large group of people for all genders, right? A lot of us will say, hey, guys, especially in the sports space, come on over, guys. You're automatically excluding anyone who doesn't identify as a boy, right? Or that prescribed gender as a guy. And so things like that are just those small catches. I'll still say guys and be like, whoop. And so it's just those quick corrections in the moment of, oh, I'm so sorry. There's multiple people here. Come on over, everyone. Brother and sister, we can refer to them as siblings. And something that I learned recently for young people in our life who are the children of our siblings, the term that is being used is nibblings, which I really enjoy. So we'll add that to the list as well. Other things that we can do to dismantle gendered spaces. Sometimes young kids have been taught, right? They live in our society, so they're going to work within the binary. So here are some examples of things that we can respond with. So when kids say, oh, is that a boy or a girl? An example could be, we can't tell their gender just by looking at them. Why don't we just go ask them to play? Or other examples here of when their boys can't do this, right? Other ways that we can open the conversation to help young people explore gender at 6 and 7 years old is a beautiful thing for them to start understanding that it is a choice, it is a spectrum, and they ultimately have space to decide how they want to show up.
So that, ladies and gentlemen, is just one of a bunch of clips that we got this morning live on SpyStream. Now, SpyStream is something that is exclusive to me. I am the only person taking people inside these live trainings as they're happening. And trust me, guys, there are more clips coming. I've got clips. The entire presentation, and they said this at the very beginning, was designed explicitly to dismantle the gender binary. We had them, there was a section in the presentation where they were all encouraged to share their gender identity, and they couldn't use gendered language to share their gender identity, and people were like, I feel like a graceful flower, and I feel like camel with sparkle, and like la 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 la, and it was like, it was insane. It was everything that I wanted in a woke training. We saw that live this morning, so I went live a little bit late today because I was busy making clips and exporting clips and doing all this stuff and trying to get this story out there. And of course, most importantly, so far as I'm concerned, posting the thread on Twitter. And for some reason, and I don't know why this happened, Twitter has changed my name to the Unwoke wiki, because I was working in the Unwoke wiki account earlier today. And for some reason, Twitter said, oh, you're working in this Unwoke wiki account? That must mean you want your main account changed to the Unwoke wiki information. And I was like, what the fuck? And then it took my blue check away because it changed the name of my profile. And now my profile is under review by Twitter, so I can't change it back. So everyone's just gonna have to deal with me being called Unwoke Wiki on Twitter for a few days until Twitter gets their shit together and fixes it so I can change my name back. I don't know what the hell that was about. But anyway, guys, my point is this. When we come up with stories like this, not only is it helpful for you guys to share the article on the Substack, which of course is great, but for those of you who are on Twitter or X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, one of the most helpful things you guys can do when we come up with stories like this is to not just share this tweet and like retweet it, but what you also want to do is you also want to quote tweet it. And because if you quote tweet it, I'm going to be able to retweet you and all this stuff. And so we get some extra play for it. So if anyone is on X or Twitter, oh, no. Colin Wright has no respect for what I do. I have no respect for Colin Wright. And Colin Wright's girlfriend or fiance or whatever the fuck she is, Christina Buttons, is a legitimate psycho who has been shit-talking me on the internet for years, which is why Colin Wright doesn't like me, because of his cunt girlfriend, Christina Buttons. So that ain't gonna go nowhere, because Colin Wright, like every other conservative influencer on the internet, doesn't actually care about the problems that he claims to care about. Christina Buttons doesn't actually care about the problems she claims to care about. It's all about social media clout and influence. And so if you want these things shared, guys, you got to get on your own Twitter account, share it yourself, quote tweet it. I will retweet you. And we got to do this ourselves, guys. The influencers are not going to save us because the influencers don't really give an F about any of this. They just care about being famous and having retweets and likes and clout and going on all the shows. So yeah. And they're all fucking around on Twitter when I'm going to trainings at 9:30 in the morning and getting actual news that none of them do. And then they steal my journalism and call it theirs, which is why I have to brand everything 19 ways from Sunday now. Anyway, thank you, Jan. I appreciate it. Anyway, guys, I wanted to make sure people knew about that. And if you are a supporter and you haven't yet checked out SpyStream, you can. The full stream is available in this if you want to watch the full thing. Of course, it is still on the links that went out last night as well. But I'm going to be doing some more clips from this. It's going to be great. And of course, I have some more. I have some more because that's not our only spy stream of the week. That is but our first spy stream of the week. We will be doing another spy stream on Thursday. What the hell? That's not what I wanted. I wanted this. There we go. We will be doing another spy stream on Thursday, and I believe it's at noon. Yep, this one is a little bit later. So if you want to join the next spy stream, which is in 2 days from now at noon, it's going to be a more in-depth training. It's going to be a 3-hour workshop, and it's another biggie, guys. ain't no rinky-dink organization doing the training that we're going to be watching on Thursday. I'm already in. I've already got their info. And so we will be doing that on Thursday. And the only way to get access to Spy Stream live, so you can see journalisming happens in real time. That's what you're getting when you're getting Spy Stream. You're actually seeing journalism happen in real time before anyone else knows about it. How cool is that? And you get to be a part of that. You get to be a part of like uncovering the stories. So if you want to join me for the next Spy Stream at noon, head over to my Substack, which is Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. And what you want to do is sign up as a supporter. And that's $8 a month or $80 a year. I am completely 100% grassroots funded by normal people on the internet who just want to know what the truth is. You don't want the bullshit. You don't want the clickbait. You don't want the nonsense. You want nuanced takes and you want receipts that you can see for yourself and decide what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. My only obligation is to tell you the truth and to show you the receipts so you know it doesn't come from me. You never have to say, I never say, pinky swear, trust me, bro. You can sign up and see all of the information for yourself and decide what you are comfortable with. So if you guys wouldn't mind doing that, I would really appreciate it. Another way you can support the work I'm doing is, of course, by heading over to the Unwoke Art store, which is unwokeart.com. And there you can get some sick merch like the limited edition Whiteness Means Capitalism t-shirt. You can get the limited edition Plague Doctor for the Unwoke wiki. And speaking of the Unwoke wiki, let's head over to the Unwoke wiki, which is Unwoke wiki, unwoke.wiki, which I'm currently logged in on that I don't want to be, but that's all right. Hang on. Log out. log out. I'll have to change. I'll have to change my username later just to make sure. I'll have to change my password, my username, all that stuff. That's not even the real account, by the way. That's not the admin account for any haters who are watching this. And what we want to watch today is Midwest. This wiki, by the way, guys, this wiki, I have already seen like sourcing data for this wiki, energizing my community. And I want to do a particular shout out to Bot because last night Bot went down a rabbit hole that is pretty incredible, honestly. And there's going to be a story coming from what Bot found last night when she was trying to source information from the Unwoke Wiki. So the Unwoke Wiki is a new project that I've launched that is responsible for my main Twitter name being changed, apparently. Yeah, absolutely. Bot, you absolutely should put all of that in the Unwoke Wiki. And so this is basically going to be a place where it's going to be a repository for all the primary source documentation that we find as we're doing journalism and as we're digging into the bowels of the internet and all that stuff. And so Bot and I were sourcing information for the Unwoke Wiki last night, and what Bot stumbled upon is going to fucking shock you guys. I'm not exaggerating. My jaw was on the floor, and had it not been really late when she found it and I had to get up early, I would have written up the story last night, but there is going to be a story coming based on what Bot found, and it's crazy. It's crazy. And so there's going to be so much good sourcing that we're going to be able to do. I was saying to Bot, I really think that this wiki is going to end up changing the world. Because we have people like Bot involved, Reagan involved, Judy involved, anyone that I know in the community that wants to be involved, you guys can be. And we're going to be digging into the bowels of the internet to find stuff, and we're going to find so much crazy stuff. Even 24 hours into launching this and seeing some of the stuff that's come up out of the woodworks. It's been really exciting. And so I'm really excited about this project. There's not a lot in the wiki yet because we're just starting to source information, but there will be a lot going in there. My goal with this is, I only want to build the largest repository of primary source documentation of the socialist revolution in the United States. Is that too much to ask? I just want to build the largest repository that exists of primary source information about what's going on so that anyone can log on to here. They can do searches. They can find out what's going on, and they don't need to trust anyone or take anyone's word for it because it's all primary source documentation. You're seeing right for yourself what is happening. Yeah, not just a little side project. But the other reason I want to do this is honestly, it's going to be so helpful for me in reporting that I'm doing on the Substack. It's going to be so helpful for me with the 87 books that I want to write in terms of like researching, getting connections together. The uses of what we're going to be able to do with this when it has more information in it is going to be mind-bogglingly good. We are going to be able to suss out connections that no one else on the internet is talking about. We're going to be able to find like resources and companies that are sponsoring this shit and activists and all of this stuff that no one else on the internet is talking about, because all they want to talk about is the 150-year-old article that was written by a dead person. Because all they're interested in is this scholarly academic research, and none of them are actually interested in what's going on in the real world. And when you try to tell them what's going on in the real world, people like Konstantin Kisin are like, but Carlin, you fight on the internet, so meh, unfollow, bitch. And then they watch things like this later, they're like, that bitch is crazy. We don't want to hear from her, even though she's got more primary source documentation than anyone else on the internet. We're not interested in that. We only want our clickbait that's going to make us look good and get our Twitter clout because we're failed comedians. And this is the only way we can become famous is by telling conservatives exactly what they want to hear. I don't have feelings about this or anything. I don't have feelings about conservative influencers being vapid shills or anything. Exactly. Crazy people change the world. Exactly. Exactly. Will there be videos on there? Yes. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm embedding the videos, which means they're still on YouTube, which is not ideal. In my ideal world, what I want to do is I want to download all the videos from YouTube and host them on my Actively Unwoke YouTube channel and then put them in there. But time is a thing, and I can't do everything all at once. So yes, there will be clips. There will be full form videos. I want to archive all the bullshit these people are putting on the internet from every single source. So yes, in short, yes. All right, guys. Well, what we're going to do today and why I actually got in there was I wanted to find this video. Now, this is a video that kind of continues and maybe will conclude. There is one more video from this organization, but this is an organization that we found last week called the Midwest Institute for Sexuality and Gender Diversity. It is loosely affiliated with the University of Minnesota, and they put a bunch of these trainings online about trans and non-binary and like whatever the F. And so we've been kind of working our way through those trainings. Now, I wanted to watch this one because it is the most recent. This is from December 13th, 2023. So this is less than a month old. All right. And so what this is, hang on. This is a presentation called The Literal Debate for Trans Lives, Insight from Trans Elected Officials. We all have a role to play in combating anti-trans legislative attacks, but our roles aren't all the same. The 7th annual Transgender Justice Teach-In brings together trans, non-binary, and two-spirit elected officials who have a front row seat to the mess and complexity of legislative debates around trans lives. We'll discuss panelists' motivation to run for office, their experience on the legislative floor, how they navigate the positions when anti-trans and other oppressive legislation comes up, and how trans refuge bills can offer a pathway to improve living conditions for trans, non-binary, two-spirit, and intersex people. And we have 2 trans state reps in, I'm assuming, Minnesota. And we're going to hear what they have to say. And this is a brand new presentation. This is less than a month old. And so we're going to watch it and we're going to see what's up. And that's what we are doing today. One more thing before we get started. We might not be doing nothing remotely controversial later. So this is, and it's not anyone's fault. Joshua has kind of like a situation that he's dealing with. It's like, he's okay, he's fine, but there's something to do with a friend and someone needs a ride and like all this stuff. I don't know all the details of it, except to say that Joshua might be indisposed later, taking care of someone else's issue. and so we might not be able to do nothing remotely controversial tonight. I still don't know. I'm waiting to hear back from him. So we'll cross our fingers that he can make it, but if he can't, that's fine too. That just happens. But we're still going to do our stream today. We're still going to watch this presentation, and that's going to be the way it goes. Guys, please mount the like button for me. Mounting the like button allows YouTube to know to recommend my content. I am massively shadow banned on YouTube. Part of the reason I'm massively shadow banned is I literally have to sit here and beg for several minutes every fucking stream for people to mount the fucking like button. I don't know why you guys don't like to mount the like button, but like this is one of those easy things you can do. There's a shocking disparity between the number of people who are watching right now and the number of people who've gone like. And that stuff really does make a difference, guys. If you want to help me get unshadow banned on YouTube, if you're like, Carlin, I can't donate to you. I have no money. I'm going to be like, cool, bro. What I need you to do is mount the fucking like button and click on my videos when they're served to you. And that's just as good to me. That's just as good. That is just as good because YouTube doesn't notify people when I'm live. YouTube unsubscribes people from my channel. And the only way we can fix that is by doing our due diligence to mount the fucking like button and make sure we're subscribed and all of that stuff. I can't control YouTube, guys. You guys are in control of YouTube, not me. All right. This is starting to look a little bit better. Is there a backstory as to why Minnesota was chosen as a flagship for socialism? Minnesota isn't a flagship for socialism. Minnesota is one of many states that have been taken over by this, but it's not like it's just Minnesota. It's just that we're watching videos from Minnesota right now. But you've got Washington, you've got Oregon, you've got Vermont, you've got Colorado. I mean, there are Massachusetts, New York. Like there are a lot of states that are implementing overtly communist and socialist policies and laws and all that stuff. So it's not like Minnesota's not like the only state. Chicago, exactly. Illinois, yeah. So it's just we've been watching videos from Minnesota lately just because that's the rabbit hole we're going down. But this is not just a Minnesota problem. This is an everywhere problem. All right, guys. Let's get this party started.
Okay, let me...
Thank you, Kino. I appreciate it. Oh, fuck. People send in super chats. I apologize. Thank you, Tayton. Mountain Goddess says, remember when Pelosi was voted back in the last time? The first thing she did was pass a law restricting those labels in Congress. Look it up. We will definitely look that up, Mountain Goddess. Thank you. And then Tayton says, they weren't woke enough for me because no land blessing. Well, you know, land blessings are interesting because land blessings go in and out of style. And so sometimes like land blessings were really in style like 4 years ago, and then they kind of got out of style. But I've kind of seen land blessings starting to make a comeback lately. So who knows? Maybe the great half-hour land blessing that we experienced several months ago during happy hour, and the people who remember the half-hour land blessing know exactly what I'm talking about. It was literally a half hour long. It just kept going and going, and there was a whole history of the land, and there was a slide deck about the land, and it just like the moment that you thought that the land blessing was over, like it just kept going. It was the longest land blessing in the history of land blessing. All right, so we're going to let them introduce themselves, and then we're going to do our vote about who says capitalism first. Okay?
Knowing we're starting at 5, maybe I'm going to give a couple minutes for folks to hop in.
Ooh, audio's good
before
today.
we get started. So we'll let folks get in here and get situated.
At least the audio's good. At least the audio is good.
Good morning. My name is Jean-Pierre, calling from the M&T Bank.
I don't know why they're not saying anything. Let's fast forward. Jeez, just sitting there, awkward silence.
Okay.
There we go.
That feels good.
There we go.
Folks, it's time and go ahead and get us started. So for folks tuning in, hey, hi, hello. My name is RB. I use they, them pronouns. I serve as both the coordinator for sexuality and gender equity initiatives at the University of Minnesota Duluth in very northern Minnesota. And I also serve as director of programs for the Midwest Institute for Sexuality and Gender Diversity, which is a Midwest regionally based nonprofit that centers queer and trans youth. This is our 7th annual Transgender Justice Teach-In. UMD and the Institute have been partnering on this program since 2020. So not the full history of the program, but for the majority of it at this point. We kind of synergized efforts in 2020 when a very obvious thing happened. And we were all forced to go virtual with our programming, but we still wanted to hold necessary space for queer and trans folks to come together, specifically focusing on trans experiences. So I'm excited to be coming back for the 7th annual iteration of this experience and bring this conversation to folks. So the Transgender Justice Teach-In, its main objective is to center the needs, experiences, and liberation of trans, non-binary, intersex, and two-spirit people. And we do that by way of bringing together really rad folks to have enriching conversations.
Rad means radical.
About exactly that.
That means
trans
socialist.
needs, experiences, and liberation. Our focus specifically this year is the experiences of trans elected officials.
Massage Chair Wellness, aka Allison, says they will be the first to say capitalism. Well, we'll see. We'll see. I keep waiting for them to be the first to say capitalism, but I'm disappointed every time. So, but maybe we'll get our victory today.
And what wisdom they hold as folks who interface and are engaged in literal debates for queer and trans lives and additional marginalized populations. So today we're joined by 2 Minnesota.
No. But Spy Stream is on Thursday, not on Wednesday. Oh my God, you almost just gave me a heart attack. No, Spy Stream is on Thursday, not tomorrow. We will still have a Zoom tomorrow because Spy Stream is on Thursday. Jesus Christ. I was like, Carlin, did you not look at a calendar again?
State representatives Lee Finke and Leash Kozlowski, who've done notable advocacy work at the state level, pushing for policy that improves the livelihood of queer, trans, and additional marginalized groups. I do want to make a quick disclaimer that we are having this convo today with Leash and Lee based on their current roles as state representatives. As a 501c3, the Midwest Institute for Sexuality and Gender Diversity cannot endorse candidates for office, and in no way should today's program be considered an endorsement for any candidacy or future races that these folks may run. We're here to talk about some cool stuff that they are actively doing and certainly talk about the futurity of trans justice, but just wanted to offer that disclaimer. So before I bring in our guests, I want to kind of offer a bit of grounding and then some details on how today's program is going to run and how audience can engage with us over the course of the discussion. So first off, I want to remind and name for folks that wherever you're tuning in today, we are all situated in places and on lands impacted by the continued colonization of Indigenous peoples.
Oh, land blessing! Oh my God, land blessing! You guys got your land blessing. This is from 3 weeks ago. Now, of course, colonization means what? Pop quiz for the chat. What does colonization mean? All the conservative influencers get this wrong. They're like, colonization means violent revolution, or decolonization means violent revolution, but we know it doesn't mean that, right? What does colonization mean? Colonization means don't just use one word, Bob. Come on, give me more. You're better than this. Capitalist oppression, implementing capitalism, converting to capitalism, the introduction of the capitalist system, privatizing land under the oppressive force of capitalism. Colonization is the implementation of capitalism, imposing capitalism, taking the one of indigenous peoples, the land of indigenous people, and privatizing it under the system of capitalism. Exactly. And capitalism, of course, is defined as private property ownership. Kino, thank you for the super chat. We need a based land blessing. I would like to thank the first settlers of Jamestown, and I would like to remind folks that Columbus was an immigrant seeking asylum to spread diversity. Thank you, Kino. Great land blessing. Excellent.
Justice is rooted in and accountable to projects of decolonization. I also want to name that we're having this important discussion in the context of immense global, national, and local struggle and unrest, and encourage our audience to track patterns and make connections across and between various movements and justice work being carried out in our current moment. We do have some pre-planned discussion points that we're going to work through today that I've shared with our panelists here, but we will be holding space towards the end of our conversation for audience questions toward the end, like I said. So we invite the audience to drop any questions you have for folks in the chat, and our chat moderators are going to collect those and pass those along to me as facilitator of this conversation for the Q&A portion. If you have clarification questions about things such as language we're using, maybe some acronyms that come up and you just have clarifications, you can plop those in the chat as
Yes,
well.
please ask them about their language.
To try to answer
that would be pretty
questions
great.
in current time.
I would
Otherwise,
appreciate
we'll
it.
try to flag those for me, and we'll work on clarifications as needed, just so that folks don't get lost in any inadvertent, jargon or language. We want folks to have access. All right, that's my simple intro spiel. So I think we're ready to get into it, which makes me really happy and excited because this has been a not say a long time coming, but just like I've been really hype about this being the focus of this conversation for many months. When I was like, what are we going to focus on? This is what we're going to do. So Leash and Lee, thank you so much again for carving out some time in your obscurely busy schedules to have this conversation. I'm really jazzed to bring you both in conversation, especially since you're already very connected and are doing some collaborative and co-conspiratorial work in the State House. So why don't we start off with some introductions, however you want to frame that. So who are you? What are you up to? And anything else you'd like to share with folks tuning in today? Going to be a Minnesota standoff of who's going to go first, isn't it? Let's go.
I'll go. So thank you, RB, so much for the invitation. I'm so grateful to be here with you and with my co-conspirator at the Capitol, Leash Kozlowski. It's a real honor. So my name is Lee Finke. I'm the representative from District 66A. I live in St. Paul in the Midway neighborhood, and I represent a portion of St. Paul, a portion of Roseville, as well as Falcon Heights and Lauderdale. My background is in activism and journalism and documentary filmmaking. Before I was elected, I was working for ACLU of Minnesota. Before that, I was doing a lot of media production and journalism, covering the intersection of social justice and pop culture. I did a lot of coverage of the Black Lives Matter movement in the Twin Cities, as well as around the country, trans and LGBTQ activism and other issues around there. So that's a little about me. I could talk a lot more. I've got a couple kids. I am, very happily trans and thriving in Minnesota.
Snaps.
Cool. Hey, everybody. Buju, Ozawa, Anaquad, Makizin and Dodem, Asabi Kong, Nandun Jaba, Nish Mani Duwag. My English name is Leash Kozlowski. I guess you could say I'm a person of many names and identities. Mostly go by Leash these days, but my real name is Yellow Cloud, and also I've got a pretty cool name in Ojibwe, which is Nikigoons, which is Little Otter, because we got to have fun and also work and play hard too. And I'm Eagle Clan. I hail from the Grand Portage and Fond du Lac Reservation, so proud Ojibwe. And then also super proud to be Mexican American as well. I come to this work as, first of all, two-spirit, indigiqueer, trans, non-binary, whatever name we put up to, but Nijmani Duwag, that's how we refer to ourselves as two-spirit. We're the people that came from the stars. And I also get to live up here in Duluth with amazing human here and get to do this great work at the Capitol with my partner in justice in Rep. Lee Finke, who I adore, and I'm so grateful for coming to this work. There's never been a person that has been trans, non-binary, or BIPOC, that combination for Greater Minnesota. There's one other representative who's been at the Capitol holding it down, and Rep. Heather Keeler, but we're closer to the cities than we are to each other. So this work, I'm often reminded that we're never alone, and that we might be the first, but we're just out here clearing the elbow space for many more to come. I came to this work, I guess, as a kid that grew up literally in the streets, bouncing from house to house. And I was mostly raised by my Ojibwe grandmother, who taught me from a really young age that for us as Two-Spirit people, as Ojibwe people, that our identities is really comes down to what's our role and what are our gifts and our strengths versus any gender or sexual orientation. And she was a fierce leader in education equity. So that's been a lot of the work that I've been fortunate to step into as the vice chair of the Posse Caucus. We can dig into that more about what the work that we've done across queer and Posse communities, but really working to bridge those gaps out of my own lived experiences around housing, economic development. I came into this work as an MBA holder, and really believing that we don't have to give up our identities, any part of ourselves. We're whole ass human beings, and we're the sum of ourselves. And that's what makes our raddest version. So really grateful to be here.
All right, we're going to pause there. I'm going to put a poll in the chat. Which one of these they thems will say capitalism first? Is it going to be contestant number 1, RB? Is it going to be contestant number 2, they them, Two-Spirit? Or is it going to be contestant number 3, Lee? Lee is actually she, her, not they them. I shouldn't be rude. No misgendering allowed. So it's going to be 1, they them number 1, they them number 2, or she, her. And if you feel comfortable, you don't have to do this. Also, register your vote in the chat. You can do a poll so we can see who everyone thinks is going to say capitalism first. But please all register your vote in the chat as well to make it official so you can get credit for it later. And no takesies, backsies. You choose one, and that's just the way it goes. No one's winning a prize or anything. All right. Everyone's got their votes registered. Let's continue.
What a dope way to invoke and carry a scene. Thank you. So let's go kind of a step in a direction of kind of getting a sense of what motivated you to run for your elected position. I think those stories are always very interesting because oftentimes, generally speaking, there's a common narrative of marginalized and disenfranchised folks who don't always feel like they ever felt anticipated they would run.
Oh, Andrew! Thank you for the super chat, Andrew. Given her background, I had a thought that might or might not be true. Is the reason journalism has been dying because objectivity can't exist in a collective? Everyone is the same. Andrew, this is a really interesting notion because I do agree with you. Objectivity can't exist in the collective, and I think that objectivity is also one of the aspects of a white supremacy culture. Which, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, we might be spy streaming about on Thursday. So I mean, this is a really interesting idea. I would have to think about it. I think this could be part of it, but I just think in general, the schools have stopped teaching people how to think, or they don't teach people how to think anymore. They teach people what to think. And so I think that challenging your own confirmation bias and having a curious imagination, just ask questions without having some sort of ulterior motive has really kind of dried up, which is sad, but that's just the way it goes. I also think that that the world is so divided. I think Trump basically broke everyone. And once they all became activists, it's hard to go back once you've become an activist. It's really hard to say, and I try to keep myself honest to do this. It's really hard to say, my enemy made a good point. or my enemy isn't a terrible, awful human being, or someone I politically disagree with, they might be right about that. Those are things that are really hard to say. And I think there's no incentives to say that in today's world. And so I think there's probably more to it than just objectivity can't exist in a collective. But I think that it's an interesting idea that I hadn't considered before. So I appreciate the super chat.
For office, and then they end up here anyway. So let's talk about some of those origin stories too, as part of kind of getting to know y'all. The standoff continues.
Yeah, you got to appoint that.
Right.
I can go ahead if that's all right. Leash, do you want to take the lead?
Ladies
Either.
first. Ladies first before
right.
they thems.
Go ahead, Leash.
Okay, cool.
Oh,
well,
no, they them first, apparently.
I thought about this a lot, and I was joking with y'all yesterday that we were prepping that I got some stories, right? And for me, when I really sat down and closed my eyes.
By the way, just for anyone who might be wondering, capitalism was mentioned in this morning's spy stream, and don't think I haven't already clipped that. Capitalism was mentioned as the cause of the gender binary in this morning's spy stream, and I was like, yes.
Long before getting into any of this work, it was as a kid, growing up in Duluth. Here, there's I grew up in the West End neighborhood, and that's the poorest. It's where the most Black and brown folks are at, right? It's where all the statistics are. And I remember standing there in spaces as a kid, in the liquor store, in the bar, and in that window was a glass window, and shown through the darkness, the light would come through. And I remember standing there being if there's something inside of me that is being drawn to say, I'm going to make this cycle different, right? And that carried me throughout my life. And my Ojibwe name is Yellow Cloud, and it literally means a person that would go ahead and vision forward a hope for better tomorrows. And so throughout my whole life, growing up, I think a lot of it was this sort of evolution of my own racial and cultural identities, and then peeling back those layers, deconstructing who the world told me that I am, or who I can and cannot be. And so growing up watching my fierce Ojibwe grandmother in the streets, and making calls and showing up at every board meeting with her friends, and it was always about Native sovereignty and Black liberation, and that our justice, it is the fight, and it needs to be the same fight, that solidarity in action. And as I went on in high school and then college, I kept being the first.
Why doesn't it make any difference at all how many non-white people there are on the west side of the bustling metropolis that is Duluth? Why doesn't this matter at all? Why would very few people in this chat even say there are many non-white people in Duluth, or not many not white people in Duluth? Why doesn't skin color matter at all? Why doesn't the composition, the racial composition of any specific town or state or whatever matter at all? Because whiteness is not about skin color. When they say white people, white supremacy, whiteness, racist, anti-racist, they're referring to the system of capitalism. Capitalism, because you're capitalist. That's right. And by capitalism, we mean private property ownership, and we don't mean anything else other than that. Do you or do you not believe that people should be able to own private property, like a home or an apartment complex or a business, or have individual rights, or have kids that they have parental rights over? That's all it is. Stop playing the skin color game, guys. Stop even acknowledging skin color as something that these people are referencing, because, and I'm serious about this, because every time you guys crack jokes Vermont's a really white state, or Minnesota's got so many white people. It's like you're playing the game that conservatives want you to play, and you're confusing people who are listening who don't understand, like many of you do, that whiteness has nothing to do with skin color at all. It has to do with the system of capitalism, because it's a reference to systemic racism. This is the biggest sticking point for most people. But once you wrap your head around that and you hear it over and over and over again, and you can see it show up, that's going to change everything. Yeah, bro, you're not on the same level that we're on right now, bro. If you want to stick around and actually learn something, you're more than welcome to do that, but you're not going to bring this bullshit into my chat. You're not going to bring this racist bullshit into my chat. We don't play this game here. You can go play with conservative influencers who will feed your racist tendencies all you want, but that is not what we're doing here. Facts are facts. Reality is reality. You can be hinged into any racist fucking crazy town land that you want to be in, but that's not the reality that we're working in right now.
The first one to make it, and you're kind of constantly always being like discredited and like, oh, you'll never make it, like you're just going to be housekeeper, you're going to end up on selling drugs, and so kind of always like being undervalued. And I just, everywhere I went, kept digging into this connection and into our ceremonies and into our people. And our elders would always like whisper when they see me, like whisper into my ear. They say like, you are loved, you're sacred, keep going, okay, go when to win, K on. And that's like a command, like don't ever stop. And so when I'd go into these education spaces, graduate, get my MBA, and then I actually was a runner, and that was like the big thing that was the outlet for me. So I love ultra running, and we formed what's called QuayPack, which Ojibwe is it's like a women's running group, but now we call it They Pack, which is kind of fun, right? And we started running. 5Ks became 25Ks, became a marathon, became 50, 100 milers, became so much more than just the running, but for our community to have this affinity space to say like, hey, if you can run and you can do this, like we could go and we could get a better job, we could get a promotion, we could get into that master's degree, we could get your kid back. And our tribal community started literally prescribing us as like medicine, like, oh, you're anxious, or like you got something going on, go run with that group. And then it became like, well, yeah, why wouldn't I? Why not us? Like, why not me? And so when the opportunity came, and it was just a couple of years before that, Sharice Davids and Deb Holland and Peggy Flanagan, in Deb Holland and Peggy Flanagan, of course, being the highest ranking Native people. Sharice Davids is the first Native and Indigenous queer person at the congressional level. And I met her the week that she took office. And like, I'll never forget Sharice saying to me, like, we have everybody in the world who has the data, they got the numbers, they can, write the budgets, they can do this and that. And that's really important. We need scientists, we need all this. But what we need is people like you and me who have our stories and who have our...
Alexis, this isn't dumb at all, because conservatives are again confusing people with this language by trying to, what's going on is like conservative influencers, when people go in their feed and they say, Carlin says whiteness means capitalism, they go, oh, ha, 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 Carlin doesn't know what she's talking about because Carlin doesn't know the difference between personal property and private property. And oh, isn't that silly that you think whiteness means capitalism? Trust us, bro. Pinky swear it means exactly what we tell you it means. And don't ever listen to that crazy bitch over on YouTube who has shown you evidence after evidence after evidence after evidence that whiteness means capitalism, because that crazy bitch doesn't read the philosophy papers written by the 150-year-old dead people, and we read the philosophy papers, so that bitch doesn't know what she's talking about just because she's watched thousands of hours of this training and has heard them say this in context and over and over and over and over. Don't listen. Don't trust your lie. Okay, maybe I had some feelings just then. But that's the reason this question is coming up, and I know that because this question has come up a lot lately. Is there a difference between personal property and private property? So far as we are concerned, no. What they're talking about when they're saying personal property, things like your phone or like a book or like smaller things within your house, but those things don't matter. Those things don't matter at all. When we say that capitalism is defined as private property ownership, what they are referring to, and we have socialists on tape literally saying this, so this is not coming from me, this is coming from them, is that private property is your home, is apartment complexes that you can buy and be a landlord of, is a business, is your kids, your parental rights, is your individual rights. That is what we're defining as private property, because that's what socialists define as private property. Okay? And so when we're talking about that, that is what we're referencing. And those are the things that socialists want to deprivatize when they're talking about abolishing capitalism, abolishing private property, and bring them into the public collective so that the government owns your home. You don't have a business. No more entrepreneurship, because the government owns all the businesses and will only have the businesses that they want to have that support what they want. The government owns education. The government owns energy. The government owns your individual rights. The government owns your kids. Kids are owned by the collective. That's what we're talking about. Nothing else matters. And conservative influencers can have all the fee-fees they want about that. But we have direct evidence over and over and over and over and over and over and over again that real activists, not dead philosophers, real activists are saying this in their real world trainings. And of course, the conservative influencers can't be bothered to listen to that because it's so uncouth to watch all those socialist activists talk about what they're doing in the real world. We would rather read philosophy papers written 200 years ago by dead people and pretend that is some version of what's going on in reality today.
Cultural strengths and who have our gifts and who are going to bring our people and make sure that our people who haven't been heard for a long time, because we get all these politicians, but they're not listening up. We need you. And that was the moment that for me, I think I felt my body step into my two-spiritness, but then also step into my power and say,
Power.
I'm gonna go for this. So that's like a snippet. There's so much more, but I think it's really important that we have those people who go ahead, who show us what can be and clear that space and show us that two-spirit people, that indigenous queer people, that trans folks, that we're medicine, that our gifts are needed every single place.
That was amazing, Leash.
Stunning and brave and beautiful.
Yeah, so I just a little bit about how I got here. I mean, I never planned to run for office. That was never part of my trajectory. Like I said, I come from activism. I got involved seriously in activism in 2003 when I was in college and we were organizing against the Iraq War. That was the first time I sort of organized in coalition in the streets doing work.
Hang on, I got a super chat coming in from Kino. Thank you, Kino. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. Well, I pretty much think we're all going to end up in the re-education gulag. So if you just accept that your fate is inevitable, that the socialists are winning because the conservatives are too stupid and too lazy to do anything about it, and they listen to horrible, horrible people who lie to them, and they go, you're winning, conservatives, you're winning, pinky swear, trust us, bro. If you just accept the fact that we're totally and completely fucked, and that we're all going to end up in the re-education gulag, and this is about going out with a bang, because you don't go out with a fucking whisper. You go out with a bang, mother effers. If you just accept the fact that we're totally fucked and we just really need to make as much noise as possible before they all drag us off to the gulag, but eventually we will go to the gulag and we'll all be in there together and it'll be fine. You know, it just makes life a lot easier.
On a national movement that I was kind of hooked in after that. So I was always kind of engaged in politics, but always from the activism space and never from the I should run for office space. But fast forward to the 2016 election and afterwards when we have, it was really 2017 when we saw the North Carolina bathroom bill. start getting the national attention. And then since then, and the slow uprolling of the national coordinated anti-trans movement, and it got really scary. It still is. And I was a trans person working at the ACLU, nervous about the future. And so I just started talking to people in my community in St. Paul about how we get trans people into our government. We had elected 2 trans people to the Minneapolis City Council in 16, one in 16, one in 17. And we needed to keep doing that. That was incredible. 2 Black trans electeds, the first 2 Black trans electeds in the country. And as I was talking to people about whether or not we were going to be able to bring somebody into the state government, a couple times people would say, well, like, you should run, and I was like, well, I can't run. I live in St. Paul. I'm represented by Athena Hollins, who is bomb. And I'm not going to challenge, I'm not going to run against Athena Hollins or Senator John Markey, who's been there for 30 years and is a beloved figure in St. Paul politics, right? Like, there's simply no seat to run for. So it wasn't really an option. And I didn't really let myself consider it seriously because of that. So I just organized with people, and I started talking to people, and we started trying to figure out a way to make it happen. But always with that thought in the back of my mind, like, I would, if the opportunity was there and somebody needed to do it, I would do it. I just didn't see how it was going to be an opportunity. So fast forward to redistricting, 2022. So it's February 2022, and the new maps come out, and the new maps just kind of scooched one of the lines over, like, literally, I think 2 blocks, and it moved me into a different district. And then that district had a 17-term incumbent House member named Alice Hausman, who was retiring. So I was in a new district, and that district did not have an incumbent, so I wouldn't have to primary somebody. So my city council member called me and was like, you've been trying to get somebody to run for office. You now have a seat to run for. Like, she said, no more talking. You just fucking do it. You said it. You got to fucking do it. So I was like, all right. She said it. So I had 5 weeks after I got into the race until our convention. And in Minnesota politics, we have local conventions, endorsing conventions, and they're a very big deal. And we organized like crazy, and managed to the person who was expected, the recruited sort of DFL candidate, by just being, I'm an organizer at heart, and we organized like crazy. And we took the opportunity, and people were supportive and ready, and recognized the need for trans representation, and recognized the intersectional value of trans representation. And we did a lot of work convincing a lot of people needed convincing that a trans person could represent them if they're not trans, which is always crazy because I have never been represented by a trans person, and somehow I've maintained satisfying ability to live in a society. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got here. The seat came to me, and I ran for it and won.
I love just like the two block scoot, like that just like literally opened that up for you. That's wild.
Yeah.
I also appreciate the theme too, kind of what I hear from both of your stories, many themes, but one in particular I think is just like the kind of like periphery of people kind of like scooting you along in general, right? Like the pull-asides from like elders, or just kind of the folks hyping you up and being like, okay, like you've been talking about it, like let's go, right? Just kind of, I think naming that as a way to say that just like, yes, y'all's names were on the ballot, and y'all's names, are the ones that are, as the representatives, but like that there's already, even by the time you just.
Stephen is asking an interesting question. How long will the queer community embrace the trans community who uphold the binary before turning on them? I think it's kind of one of those things, Stephen, where it's like, I think So they're already trying to change the language from transition to transform or transcend. I wrote a post on the Substack about this the other day where I literally showed examples of them saying transform gender, transcend gender. There are organizations called transform or transcend gender. There are conferences called that. Like, they're trying to nudge the language. And I really do think it's like, I think what they're going to do is they're not going to like excommunicate people, but it's like they're going to do what they always do, which is like they're going to nudge the language. And the more that people adopt the language, the more they're going to see themselves as part of that identity. So it's like, if you can get, I mean, there are a lot of trans people who call themselves queer, right? Because they don't understand that queer is only and exclusively, oh, I bet you, how many people think that Richard here is a conservative who doesn't understand what he's looking at? Welcome, conservative. Maybe you want to actually like pay attention and listen before you make a fool of yourself on the internet. That might be an idea, Richard. Anyway, back to Stephen. So you know how there are a lot of trans people who call themselves queer because they do not understand that queer is a far left political ideology. It has nothing to do with being trans. It is only and exclusively about advancing a far left political ideology. And so what they're going to do is, like, if they can get someone to call themselves queer and then they start identifying as queer and then they start interacting with queer people, they're going to be able to like pull them over. And of course, at the same time, conservatives are acting like raging lunatics and calling for like the death and like excommunication of all trans people, which doesn't help at all, because then trans people are like, well, the right really hates us and they want us to die. And Michael Knowles is talking about eradicating transgenderism from polite society. So the left is my only choice. And then they wind up in the queer activism community where they're taken in and everyone's nice to them. Because remember, everyone at socialist events are very, very nice. And if you are trans, they are especially very nice. So that's how they're going to, I don't think it's a matter of like the queer activists are going to turn on the trans activists. I think it's a matter of they're going to be nice to them. And while conservatives are reeing about how all trans people are groomers, which is not true, then the only refuge these people are going to have is going to be the far left, and that's going to be the ball game. Rottweiler, thank you for the super chat. Some trans individuals are realizing that they should be good allies against queer Marxists, but we know conservatives call them every name in the book. This is exactly right. Like, trans people, like legitimate trans people, like our friend Mark Meets World, or like Buck Angel, or people like that, they're not the enemy. They think that this stuff sucks just as much as anyone, but they happen to be trans, and so conservatives treat them like shit. And it's a shame because like they could be the very best allies, no pun intended, like that we could have in terms of fighting back against gender ideology. They're the very best people to speak up and say, you know what, like, I'm trans, I'm happy being trans made my life better. I'm really happy that I was able to go through the process of transitioning. I just don't think that we should be doing it for kids. I think that's a bad idea for reason X, Y, B, and Z. And let me talk to you about why I, as a trans person, think that's a bad reason for reason X, Y, B, and Z. You know, they're the very best people to do that. They're willing to do it. And then conservatives treat them like dirt. And it pisses them off. And it would piss anyone off. And this is why conservatives always lose.
Decided to run and campaign, that there's already this kind of body of people who are in your corner and these hype people. But then in addition to kind of what you're saying, Lee, though, is that like there also is levels of convincing, which I think is
exactly, Prometheus, exactly. We live in a world where the left is fucking insane. The left is trying to abolish gender entirely. The left is trying to abolish parental rights entirely. The left is literally putting policies in place that have led to like 30 to 40% of kids identifying as genderqueer or non-binary. They're insane. No one actually likes them, but conservatives are calling everyone that's LGBT groomers, and they're calling women whores. And it's like am I going to vote for that? No. I'm not going to be voting for being called a groomer and a whore, and conservatives call me both a groomer and a whore and fat and ugly and every name in the book, and they clip me out of context and they lie about me and they smear me and they defame me, and then they're like, why don't you want to vote for our candidates, Carlin? And I'm like, go fuck yourself. No. And you did it to yourselves. Stop being retards on the internet. It's really not that hard.
What I'm hearing a lot of common narrative around with folks, marginalized folks especially, who've ran of just like, it's not as simple as kind of, you know, our cishet white dominant counterparts, where it's just like, well, duh, like that's the type of person who runs. Like the amount of convincing and labor that I think comes with it. I know, Leash, I feel like, I don't know if this is the place. I know you had yesterday, you're like unmute, like, yes, I know exactly where this is going. Just kind of like,
I have something to say.
Yes, I knew. I was like, I didn't mean to set this up, but it's right here. It's set up perfectly. Of just kind of the additional barriers and just kind of the additional discouragement that you know, LGBTQ folks, Black and brown folks, just like marginalized folks in general experience, even with the thought of running or, you know, being part of electoral politics in general. I know I had some feels that you wanted to name, or some, you know, insight on that.
Yeah, and I think, like, you know, Lee, you mentioned this of like the idea of like, how could you possibly represent us? And at a time where we could get, you know, there was a report out about the number of queer, and then you add in the layers of folks with disabilities, with other undervalued identities. And if we are going to have a inclusive, multiracial, representative democracy, then that means that we need to be in these seats with the gavels and the microphones, right? And the decision making and the ability to disrupt and to manage the purse strings. And I remember when I was going along on the campaign trails, almost like the sense of you need to apologize for winning. I walked around this community sort of like, you know, being somebody who's like got all the qualifications, and everybody always wants me to lead with like, make sure you tell everybody that you've got an MBA. Make sure that you tell people that, you know, you've got these years of executive experience at a city. Make sure that they know these things. When in reality, to run for office, all the qualification I really need is to live experience.
On its skin, or
but we know that we need to work 10 times harder just to be able to show or to like appease, you know, oftentimes white cisgendered folks. When I was out door knocking, and it entails lots of process, and you get a team together, and part of that was like, right, building out the bench of folks to bring into these spaces, which have us boxed out, not just as candidates, but along the entire kind of campaign process into being elected and beyond. But I was knocking one day, and an elected official.
Would you capitalize me? I would capitalize me. You guys are too much. And now I need to watch Silence of the Lambs later. God damn it.
Said, well, we don't need any more women. We've got a lot of those. And I said, well, one, I was like, that's actually not true. And great, I'm not a woman. I said, you know, I'm trans, non-binary, two-spirit. And they said, well, yeah, we had a lot of those at the Capitol. We don't need any more of those. And I said, what's funny is I'd actually be the very first ever in Minnesota history. And then they paused, me harder, and they Daddy. Were like, well, what impact does that have on my life?
I feel like this absolutely needs to go on a t-shirt. Capitalize me harder, Daddy. Ah. Okay, now we're just getting silly because we had an exciting morning and I'm sleep deprived, so I might be a little wacky. Come on. Forgive me, please.
And, you know, this is somebody who is overseeing education of our children and budgets and curriculum development and our teachers and so many things. And I just think like that to me just was so evident of the barriers and the misperceptions and the like you're not enoughness in this space. And then I, on the back end of coming off of the most like amazing trifecta session where I think, I know me and Lee, we got so many bills done. We delivered so big for our districts, and we did the hard yards for racial justice and gender equity, and right, all of these areas. And to come home and to be met with, well, but how does that benefit us? And so yeah, it's a lot of unpacking and breaking down those isms, and we're really building in and building out our power,
Oh
because there's a lot of
my God. Bill wins. Bill wins the day. Bill wins. You guys are so dirty. Oh my God. This is the audience that I've cultivated with my shenanigans, and I'm proud. I've got no hate for this. This is amazing. I get paid to make sex jokes on the internet. I'm going to update the store, Kino. Relax. I got a lot of stuff to do. How many sexual things can we do with capitalism today? Remember, take advantage of the body while you still own it.
people with us, and thankfully those folks have been few and far between, but they're there.
I think this segues well into kind of the next question that we wanted to tuck into, which is like a 15-part question, but ultimately, right, like, talked about your motivations to run. Obviously, those motivations manifested into a successful campaign and being elected into your position. So I think the gist of the question, right, is just like, what have been kind of some learning curves, some like shocking moments, like just kind of like the more specifically like experiences of just like being in this space and being in this space as like trans, non-binary, two-spirit people, right? Just like coexisting in a space that ultimately kind of captured in the point you just made, Leash, that like doesn't really know what to do with us and doesn't really know how to like accommodate us. So just like, what have been just some like moments just kind of in this, you know, last year of being in this space and doing this work with your various experiences and identities? Really simple questions, I know.
Yeah. I mean, I can start on that. I think that, you know, I came in the first trans woman who served in our government, in our state government, and there was a lot of excitement. There was a lot of support. Our campaign garnered a lot of attention. When I was elected, I got a lot of, you know, first trans coverage, and you know, it did set up, like I said prior. I'm an organizer by heart. And I want to do the work. I immediately started thinking about how can we use any of this attention in order to successfully build a movement at the Capitol for trans people, which I consider to be my, that's my job, right? Like Leash was saying, like, we are the first ones here, and the work we are doing is benefiting everyone, whether or not those people realize it. So I give myself the space to say, I am here to help trans people. And I know that flows upward. All liberation flows outward. So it was like, what do we do with this attention in this moment? And you know, one of the moments that I will remember. So there's a lot. I mean, this is, like you said, this could be a whole night's worth of conversation, but you know, I brought the trans refuge bill. That was immediately where I started organizing. I determined it to be the most impactful sort of first bill for us to do, a commitment that we would make. And it was the first bill that was ever.
So I want to point out that she, her has the bad black line tattoos. They, them also has the bad black line tattoos. And I'm betting if this person wasn't wearing a hoodie and we could see their arms, we see more black, bad black line tattoos, which is just a socialist thing. I don't know why. I'm still looking for an answer about why this is, but like so many socialists just have these bad random black line tattoos.
Heard at the Minnesota legislature that was positive for trans people. We've had anti-trans bills introduced. We haven't passed any because we've had divided government, but no one's ever tried to pass a bill that was like, let's help trans people with. So we did that, and we had our first hearing in the Judiciary Committee, and Chair Becker Finn created space. She was instrumental in the success of this bill, member of the Queer Caucus and the Native Caucus. And, when she gavelled that in, we put up a call and we said, hey, we're going to hear this bill. It's the first bill. And I would really like to have people come out and be in the room. Come be in the room. This is a historic moment. And it was just a judiciary hearing, and the room was just full. It was absolutely full with trans people. I am 100% sure that to that point, it was the most trans people that had ever been at the Capitol. I think we broke it a couple times that year because we just kept doing work, The Trans Day Visibility Rally was really, really, really remarkable. I mean, that to me was one of the highlights, but what I consider, one of the things that I consider to be a special power of being in the offices that we hold is that we have the power to convene, right? We can say to people, this is happening, you should be here. We should be in this room. I am in this room. I am in this room with Leash, and we belong here, and you belong here. And now you can see yourself at the table. And when we have made that invitation, people have responded. People have been waiting for an invitation. Everybody wants to be seen and felt and participating in that. And, that was maybe 2 weeks into the first session. And it was just like really overpowering. It was a really overpowering moment. And I held on to it as we went through. And I think we'll talk about some of the more policy debates as we go, and I can talk about some of the horrible things. But this is something that I thought about as we went into some of the later debates where, it was really hard, and we were, even in that first room, we heard terrible things, and our community had to listen. But when you're all there together, there is power there, and it makes it different, and it feels different, and it meant something to the community, and I think it showed them, at least in terms of the trans refuge bill, that this work was going to happen. People were interested, people were here. The leadership had to take it seriously after that. It wasn't on anyone's radar to move trans refuge. It happened because Alicia and I and the other LGBTQ members who were elected forced it.
I heard it.
And we said, you're going to have to pay attention to us. And that wouldn't have happened if everybody hadn't come out and said, we're here for this and we need to see it happen. And that, that was a really positive and powerful moment that I will always remember, especially because there were so many really hard moments, which I can talk about if we want to talk about hard things.
Yeah, it just listening to it is flashing me back to the Capitol, which is to some of the beautiful things. It's a mixed bag, but I am immediately flashback to actually when I worked at the city of Duluth, and then when I launched at the state. My big cousin Peggy Flanagan told me, this is the place where, our spirits go to get eaten, and you need to do every single thing that you possibly can to tend to your fire, to tend to and be a good relative to everybody else's fire, because we need you in this work. And so going into these spaces where that is how I start my days at the Capitol. And I know we have smudged together and used medicine, and it's always in the hallways.
You use
Because
medicine in the
we need it,
hallways?
and because I think this joy and this goodness is ultimately like the antidote in a space that was not only not designed for us, certainly not designed for Black and brown folks, and not even a thought in the world to trans and gender non-conforming folks. Every day we go into a Capitol room that has an image of Abraham Lincoln, which
So close.
for anybody who isn't aware, Abraham Lincoln killed the most Native people in the history of the United States as a president. So there's also an image of like this settler colonials that my desk faces, and it's something about like the fair maiden settlers who created the state, you know, it's sort of, and then this like demure looking Native woman who's just sort of like, take our land and our lives, right? And so that's the context and the backdrop of which we do this work. And so, yeah, Trans Day of Visibility, what a beautiful day. I also think like at the same time as we had all this anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ legislation, we were also waiting on ICWA. In Minnesota, we have the Minnesota Family Indian Preservation Act. And so just sort of like our bodies and our spirits and our communities, you could just feel it, this edginess of like, what's going to happen? What next bad thing is going to happen, right? And we started out the session with a round dance, which was the first time ever that the state government allowed us to have our drum, which is the heartbeat of the people. And so to start off our very first day with a drum and a round dance, and then to flash forward just a short time after to fill that same rotunda with our people and to have our expression and our joy and our celebration, that flowed into in the Senate side when we heard the trans refuge bill. It was the exact same day that we were hearing the MIFA ICWA bill. And so the tribal leaders were actually in the room. So you had Indigenous people, Indigiqueer, filling the room at the same time as all of us trans folks were in there. And with the boarding schools and the history of Christian like colonial violence,
Say it.
it's actually trans and Two-Spirit people that they plucked from our communities first. And so I think the fact that like Lee and me ended up at the Capitol being called at the same time that we called our communities and convened us was absolutely like magical and amazing, and something that will be doing good for generations to come.
There's like a shiver trying to work its way. I don't know if it's up my spine, down, doing something. Just thinking about like energy and physical space, and just like disrupting like the complacent energy of just like what has historically always been, you know, the dominant representation of who is in electoral politics, who's represented, who's not, is just really significant. And like, I'm low-key experiencing some FOMO that I haven't been in those spaces. So I feel like I need to change that in the inevitable future. So like, send me a text.
Does anyone feel like we've turned this capitalism game into like, we're all watching like a cockfight? And we're all, we
message when the next like big rally of like trans folks is hanging out at the Capitol, I guess. This is a little sidebar, I think, but I feel like I sidebar in terms of this is not prepped, but I feel like I'm also mindful that this feels like maybe a growing wave or trend of kind of just like
edging us.
Folks with less conventional backgrounds in terms of who ends up in political office, right? Like activism backgrounds, you know, like very deeply rooted, embodied community work, right? Organizing, etc., that both of you have spoken to. And so I'm thinking too about like just, again, this trend that feels like is happening of like state representatives being more bold and audacious than perhaps we've seen you know, ever, right? I think about the Montana State Rep Zoe. I don't know if it's Zephyr or Zafir.
Zoe's
who
Zephyr.
Just like got put on blast for just literally trying to show up and participate. If folks aren't familiar with like that background, like I highly encourage looking into that, right? Just like literally being pushed off the floor and not able to participate in discussion on bills regarding trans experiences because of, you know, her audacity and her risk, but trying to advocate on behalf of her constituents. I'm reminded of the Tennessee Three, the two Black state representatives, and the additional woman who got ousted again for being audacious and taking risk, and then being removed from their seats, which caused quite the stir. I think there's also a representative in Oklahoma who's definitely gotten some just like asinine treatment, but just like, this is not specific to just, you know, one area, right? We're talking about Minnesota today, that happens to be where we're situated. But that there seems to be this trend that I don't know, there might be a question in here of just like kind of speaking to like, is this what the next wave of especially localized politics looks like or can look like, in terms of what you're seeing from colleagues, what maybe you're seeing folks motivated to do, and if this is just like a vibe that's going to carry into kind of, you know, upcoming years of policy action and activism. I think there's a question in there. Just kind of, I feel like there's a lot of through lines between some of the experiences you're naming of disrupting, but from the standpoint of folks who like got elected and you're now allowed and supposed to be here because you did the work to get there.
Yeah, I can start on this if that's all right. First, I want to thank you for shouting out our members around the country. And you mentioned, but there is a Black non-binary Muslim representative, Maury Turner, who you made reference to from Oklahoma, who was censored and very badly mistreated by their colleagues. And that is true of a lot of people. And I think, I mean, I'll speak specifically to Minnesota because I only want to speak from my own experience, but I do believe that there is. So I think I think about this in two ways, right? Because right now you're right? The trifecta class of people who were elected last year, like
listen. I used to have that haircut, and I used to try to get my hair to be that big, and that getting your hair that big is not easy, and it never stays up. And there's all sorts of like, and so I under like the fucking struggle on that haircut is real. And I still think like people like, oh, you look like a trans person, whatever. I love that haircut. That haircut was so comfortable. Like you could wear it in lots of different ways. I got to have the sides of my head shaved, which was always really nice in the summer. It was so easy to maintain. And I got so much, well, no, that's not why I grew out my hair. I grew out my hair because my husband was like, Carlin, I've never seen you with long hair before. Can you grow out your hair? And I was like, ugh, fine. So I grew out my hair from my husband. I can't, but I am sympathetic to the haircut. All right, don't fuck with the haircut.
We are coming in and we're playing for keeps, and we're not taking, we're not waiting, we're not doing the thing, right? Where like you wait your turn, you serve a couple terms, you get some power, you get a gavel, you run your committee, and then you start to make changes. Like we don't have time for that. Alicia and I, we sit next to each other on the House floor, and we immediately were like, all right, let's organize, let's accumulate power, let's distribute it, right? Like let's figure out how we're supposed to do this, because we only have this like chance and we don't know how long it's gonna last. And that's not unique to us, I mean, I think one of the things that Alicia and I are realizing and that does give us power, frankly, is that our communities have targets on us. And by occupying that space at all, we are able to claim power. And it is like what politics is about. A lot of us have a hard time with that word. I know I have never been a person who's like, I want to accumulate power. But that's how we do it. We just want to do it for good and distribute it towards something that has meaning for our people.
Well, Chad, I'm going to say that I think this seems pretty retarded because you're literally dehumanizing people. And some of those people made mistakes when they were kids. And if you don't want mistakes that you made when you were a kid held against you for the rest of your life, then I suggest you don't hold mistakes against other people that they made for the rest of their lives. And I also, in general, think that dehumanizing people is a really, really fucking evil thing to do. So you're not going to get sympathy for that particular position here. We don't hate trans people. We don't care if people are trans. We care if people are socialists. And that's really all we care about. No, no one said capitalism yet.
And so, yes, I do identify that, but I also think for me personally, I care a lot about history. I learn from the movement history, and I think it's really important to just recognize that.
Wait. Who is sniping this stream? Because I feel like we have conservatives showing up on this stream that have no idea what we're watching right now and think that we're all like socialist trans people. Weird crowd today. No conservatives. We're not socialists. We're not trans. We're watching this to learn. Perhaps if you shut your mouths and actually listened instead of just trying to own the libs, you'd actually learn something for fucking once.
Like, this is the moment when trans people need to be able to occupy that space and claim that power for our community so we can live and not die. That's basically the stakes.
Yep.
That has been happening.
Totes, bro.
That has been happening.
Enjoy your time out.
Has been undocumented people, and
Go away.
it has been people with HIV, and it has been gay rights activists and civil rights activists. Like, we have a group of rabble rousers at the Minnesota House right now, and I'm really proud to be a part of them. And we're not even close to what we were seeing in the 60s, when people were getting elected and raising hell, because the time.
Oh, we have WEF retards. No, bro. No, they're not a bigger issue that where the fuck are you guys even coming from? No, they're not a bigger issue than socialism. And the fact that you think they are shows how grossly misinformed your fucking influencers are about what's going on in the real world. So you got two choices, bro. You can either shut your fucking mouth and open your ears and listen to what's being said, or you can show yourself out. No one's forcing you to be here. Why don't you go watch some conspiratorial stream on like Cozy or some such shit? We're doing real work here. You're not going to fucking disrupt our shit with nonsense. Jesus Christ.
That you are in calls for you to act accordingly. And our times are severe and they are dangerous. But in this country, that is not unique. It's just this moment that it's our community.
Always got to ruin everything.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was so powerfully said, and I resonate so much, so gripping, like in the throes of it. It's sort of that whole notion that like power doesn't concede anything without a demand, right? That also with each generation, like it's on us to continue to fight for our rights. And I think back to what kind of gives me like a lot of hope and some like fueled audacity is to think back, like I was talking about, to my grandparents. And Lee and I come to this work through movement politics and organizing and activism and getting into a lot of good trouble, and to go back and to think in those moments where it feels inevitable, right? Where it feels like it's an impossibility for us to make progress, or we're just like holding on to what we have. How could we keep fighting for more? Or what if the work that we do all this amazing work, and then the next crew comes in and they just dismantle it. But that's how systems of power and oppression and colonial violence want to keep us
capitalism.
And so that's why in this work, being so committed to
the system of oppression that they're referring to is capitalism. They keep saying system of oppression, and they mean capitalism, and they're saying colonialization, which also means capitalism, and they won't say fucking capitalism.
Like Miriam Kabe says, like, hope is a practice, right? Like hope in action. And I come from a people who we're praying folks to our money due, but it's with our hands and with our feet. And so what we have right now is we have one more year. We're in we just finished our first year of our second terms. And I think what you spoke of, like this group of people who are led with and by community to have, not power over, to not feel greedflation, but to have power with and for. And that's what it is that our communities, that my elders, that our young people remind us every day, that it might be the title that got us into the room, but it's the people who put us there, and it's our purpose, and it's those values that is the mandate for what we need to keep doing. And so thinking back to sort of like this framework in, I mean, apparently in a very Ojibwe centric mode today, but you know, like reframing and shaping our Zagadiwin Inakanagowin, which is like a framework of love, and how we get back to deconstructing these gender binaries, right? To deconstruct this separation, this othering of ourselves and our existence, and find our ways back home to ourselves and to each other and to this land. And I think that's the work that's at hand, and that's the work that I'm committed to very deeply. And I know that this class of trifecta majority makers are too, with this community, that our families don't have time to wait. You know, Savannah Graywind to Savannah Williams, they didn't have time. And so we just have to keep pressing on. And because it's our hands that are out here doing the work. We're driving buses. That's our communities out here who are taking care of our babies and our elders in the hospitals. Like, it's our trans and queer communities who are out there making sure that our communities are fed. And so I think, like, continuing to assert our the impact and the contributions and who we are, and reminding each other of that is the way forward. And we're going to get there.
Word. I don't even pivot. So I want to revisit the trans refuge bill. I feel like this is good, like, kind of like, oh, this is a literal, tangible, like, representation of some of the hard work, the heavy work, the timeliness work that you're speaking on, both of you are speaking on. So one, can we just start kind of with just like a overview of like what the bill entails, right? What it's about. And then I know it was, you know, not as simple as like, here's the bill and everyone passed it and hooray, we're all happy. I know that's not what happened. So I definitely want to like touch on like what it is, what it's, you know, where it came from, how that made its way across the finish line, and just kind of like some futurity thoughts about just like, you know, what else can be stacked on that to kind of keep the momentum of that big win.
I feel like this is your big one, Lee. Do you want to start?
Yeah. I feel like I started the last one, but yeah, I mean, I was the primary author of the Trans Refuge Bill, so I'm happy to talk about what the Trans Refuge Bill does. It is, so, I mean, first, as I said, like, the Trans Refuge Bill was the one that I decided, I mean, as a community, we put together our priorities, right? But like, this one, it was just like, it felt like the one to lead the new day here with, because it is a promise to protect people. And when you make a promise to protect people, you can't stop protecting people.
See, Barbie here is the type of conservative that I appreciate. I followed Dr. K forever, though I'm informed, but half the reason I'm here is for the unhinged aggressiveness. I can't lie, I love it. The other half is to learn. See, the people that survive on my channel, they appreciate my unhinged aggression. They appreciate that I will tell people off. They appreciate that I will put people in their place. And if you can't handle it, go watch someone else. I am one fiery bitch, and I'm not going to change for YouTube.
People, right? Like, if you have children, you know that, like, by agreeing to protect someone, you have to do that every day. You know, you can't not continue to do that work. So when we get to the second part, like, the reason that the Trans Refuge Bill took that central role.
Oh, hang on. So much. He could learn so much. who knows? Perhaps this year I will relent and finally accept Cassandra's offer to book me on that show because I like Cassandra. Cassandra DM'd me the other day and she was like, Carlin, I want to get you on the show and you can come down and play with my monkeys. And I was like, well, I don't really want to go on Tim Pool's show, but I do want to play with Cassandra McDonald's monkeys. Like, I really do. Like, I've never played with a monkey before. I like monkeys. I think it'd be fun. And so I was like, you're going to put me on a show where I'm called fat and ugly on the internet for several hours, but I get to play and no one's actually going to listen to what I'm saying. And Tim's going to come at me aggressively because he wants to be smarter than me. But the trade-off is that I get to play with monkeys. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see.
Was because it was a statement, but it was also a promise. What the bill does essentially is it creates a shield around Minnesota, and it says if you want to access gender affirming care and you live in a state that has either banned or restricted gender affirming care, you can come into the state of Minnesota, access your health care, and the state of Minnesota will protect you and protect your healthcare records from any negative legal consequence outside.
That's why you need to listen before you start shit posting, because no, we are not on their side
Of the state of Minnesota. So we introduced it right at the beginning of the year. At the time, like 11 states had acted to restrict or ban gender affirming care for minors and vulnerable adults, is the phrase that they use. That's not, of course, the point. The point is just to ban gender affirming care for everyone, as Texas and Florida both have essentially accomplished, and other states have gotten close. The bill also allows for minors who are in custody disputes to be able to have their custody disputes heard in the state of Minnesota if they are seeking to have healthcare provided in Minnesota. It does not, as certain trolls and
there are rules here, and if you don't follow the rules by being a dick and shit posting in my chat, then you're going to get timed out. And if you don't like it, you don't need to be here. And that's just the way it's going to go. The rules are don't be a dick, do not insult me, do not insult other people in the audience. I can do whatever I want because you're in my house right now, but you cannot do whatever you want because, again, you're in my fucking house. Number 2, no fucking whining. I don't want to hear it. We might be joking around, but we're actually doing serious stuff. We're listening to what these people have to say. We're decoding the language. We're reverse engineering what people are doing. So this is not any stream where you can come in and shitpost to your heart's content about how much you hate the trans people, because we don't hate trans people here. We don't care about trans people. We hate socialists. So this is not a free speech space. You are in my fucking house. And if you don't respect my rules, you don't have to be here, and that's going to be the way it goes.
Trollish colleagues of ours have said require anyone to have gender affirming care. It just says this is one of the options if you live in the state of Minnesota. And if you live in a state where there is simply zero option for accessing care, then that case can be heard here. And one of the options for a family court would be to proceed with healthcare, life-saving, medically responsible healthcare. Yeah, so that's sort of what it does. It doesn't actually have any healthcare provisions. It's really just a judiciary court related bill. Yeah, I mean, in terms of like what we did to get it passed, like I said before, Representative Beckerfin was essential. You know, she helped me get this bill drafted before we even got into the legislature last year. So, because I had no idea what I was doing, I didn't know the literal process. So she piggybacked me, mentored me through that process, mentored me through the committee process because she was the chair and I was in her committee. And then it was just bringing people in to talk about why it matters, what the reality of the threat against trans people is in America, and talking to our colleagues who don't know trans people, don't know what gender affirming care is, don't know, thank you, dear, don't know anything. I mean, it just
That did not seem like a happy wife.
It's not even,
that wife
cruelty,
was pissed.
right? So we had Leash and I and the whole queer caucus had a lot of education that we had to do around.
Wait. There's a queer caucus in the Minnesota State House. Is anyone here from Minnesota? There's a queer caucus. How many queer elected representatives does the state of Minnesota have in its state level government? That they're able to have an entire queer caucus.
What this means, what this does, what this doesn't do. And then I just ended up sitting in the caucus room, kind of one by one, talking to the members about what it was going to look like, what they were going to say. One of the members had a radio, one of the Republicans did a radio interview in which they referred to the trans refuge bill as the kidnapping and mutilation bill. Which is very terrible, right? The word mutilation actually is kind of a triggering word for me now after last session. I don't like to hear it or see it. But that got a lot of traction, right? So then Democrats would get emails that would be like, stop the kidnapping and mutilation bill. And then they would come to me and say, like, what's this kidnapping bill? What are they talking about? Which they knew I didn't have a kidnapping bill, but they didn't know anything about the legislation other than someone had sent them an email about this. So it was a lot of education. It was a lot of patient work, talking to leadership, telling the speaker, we can pass this. I know it's important. We must do it. We can pass it. And then she would say, well, if you have the votes, we can vote on it. They weren't doing the work for us. It wasn't a priority. It was our ability to organize the caucus. And absolutely elemental to our ability to organize the caucus was the support of the Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan, who was an extremely vocal ally of the trans community, became very dear organizing partner to me in this process and brought the governor with her. And they were willing to really, really go to the bat for us with members who needed those calls. So that's kind of the gist of it. Please fill in anything else. There's so much I could say about this bill process. So I'll just stop there.
Yeah, there's so much, and just like so grateful to have our fearless Queer Caucus chair championing, and there it really is. It's like a snowplow, like you're constantly plowing like 5 rows at the same time because you're pushing on the Senate, in the House, at the governor, in the executive level at the same time. You're getting all these messages from community, and then we're bringing community in. And
okay, guys, so breaking news. I've just gotten a text from Joshua. Sadly, we will not be able to do nothing remotely controversial tonight. I'm sorry. He's sorry. It's extenuating circumstances. Everyone is fine. It's just that he has to go and take care of something that someone else was supposed to do. So we apologize. It was an emergency. We know everyone understands. So no, nothing remotely controversial tonight, which is actually good for me because I woke up really early today and I'm tired AF. And I've got writing to do. So it actually is going to work out great. I'm going to write some stories for the Substack. It'll be awesome. Mountain Goddess, thank you for the super chat. Ever since I've been watching you, I see how the Black Marxist women in power positions right now are easier to see. They probably think that the DEI BES would, or the DEI BS would protect them. I mean, I actually find, if I'm honest about it, I actually find the Black woman Marxists to be kind of some of the better Marxists, just because, like, they're so no nonsense. You can't be pissed off at, like, a Black feminist. It's just, I like that they're like, they keep everyone in line. They've got the best fucking hair. I don't know. I'm not bad at the black feminist Marxists as much, but yeah, I mean, they're gonna find out that this stuff isn't gonna protect them. But also, DEI is not going anywhere. I don't care how many times Chris Rufo tweets like, "We killed off the DEI complex." No, they fucking didn't. No, they fucking didn't. They got one president at one university to resign, who will be replaced by someone who is just as bad. And, like, I'm not going to say it wasn't a victory, because it was. Like, honest to God, good for Rufo, man. He was hammering that. Like, I wasn't expecting him to get it. I thought the most he would get was she would resign at the end of the year and, like, go on to do other things, like, whatever. But the reality is that getting the president of Harvard to resign means effing nothing, because they're just going to be replaced with someone just as bad, and she's still on the faculty. She's making $900,000 a year. And so this notion that we killed off DEI, we did it, we're winning, conservatives are winning, such bullshit. But whatever. I mean, there is something to be said for the fact that I do think that that DEI as a specific function within corporate America is going to take a hit. I just, like, that's like a gut level feeling. Like, it's getting a really bad, like organizations only do training when they get, like, virtue points for doing the training. And so I do think that that is a potential, like, good thing, and it's a positive thing, and we should be happy if that happens. I just question whether or not that's actually going to happen. Yeah. DEI is an ongoing thing, like dismantling the patriarchy or ending capitalism or ending climate change. It's just going to morph into... This is exactly right. You can't dismantle the DEI complex because it's pervasive. It's in literally everything, down to starting in fucking kindergarten. And so, like, to say, like, we're going to dismantle the DEI complex, that's like saying you're going to abolish capitalism. Like, how are you going to do that? Exactly. Well, we're going to get the president of Harvard to resign. Okay, well, that's nice, and I'm not, like, poo-pooing that. Like, good victory, bro, like, sincerely. But how does that actually move the needle towards what the goal is? Well, everyone's going to see. Well, what the fuck does that even mean? It's like, I don't know what these people are doing. They're just like, they're saying they won just to say they won, when in fact they may have moved the needle like an inch. But it's like, when the left was doing the long march through the institutions, every time they got someone to be the president of a university, they weren't like, we're winning, nothing else to do. They didn't do that. They kept the long march through the institutions, the battle of inches. The left never fucking thinks they're winning. They never think they're winning, because the revolution to them is perpetual. For conservatives, if they have one victory, like one, it doesn't even matter how small the victory is. They're like, we're winning. Time to go home. Everyone go home. Everyone good. We won. We got the president of Harvard to resign. Nothing else to do here. But the left, when they get something like that, they're like, we're still losing. Everyone hates us. We're still losing. We've got to keep going. We've got to keep pressing. Like, the left keeps pressing, and that's how they fucking win. The right gets one little toy, and they're like, all right, we're good. Time to go home. Yeah, conservatives get complacent after winning a single tiny little battle. And they think that's the same thing as winning the war.
The thing that was also really striking and important, I think a momentum shift, and also could have been a hiccup roadblock, was when Governor Walz actually did the proclamation for trans refuge. And it was incredible and amazing, and put these protections in place.
Thank you,
And it could
Crystal.
have been a moment where it was like, take a breath and all right, now they're appeased, right? Like, we're good. We did the thing. But staying crystal clear that no, this needs to be in law, codified, right? Set in stone. And on the night that Trans Refuge passed, gosh, there was a lot of, as Rep Finke mentioned, like really pushing to get this bill so it's actually in the limelight. It has its moment. It's going to pass on the House floor. And I don't remember what time we started the bill, but around like 8, 9. It was pretty late at night, and it was sort of like, oh, let's just, we'll kick this down the road, and just looking like, no, this will not. We're gonna do this today. And then all hours of the night, was like 3, 4 a.m. and our eyes are like red, and we're looking up and we see our trans community, Two-Spirit folks filling the House galley. We know that folks are chiming in, they're messaging, they're watching online, they're setting their alarms to get back up and see what happened. And there was a moment where it was like, oh, we'll just come back and finish this later. And absolutely, we did not let that
Exactly,
happen.
Joshua,
I think
exactly.
we would have just like about screamed, because we went there and we were not going to go and hear all the crap that we heard. Like, can we talk about like how weird people are, like the obsession? Pretty strange. It's like, well, people are trying to get to work like banny books and drag and trans people. Like we would like to be working on things like banishing houselessness and hunger and gun violence. But we got it across. And the next morning, the thing I wanted to add is that like, this is absolutely, it's promises made. And I'll also say we are now in the processes of keeping promises that we're going to make sure Minnesota is a place that's a refuge, that's a cocoon, that will protect. And some of the work that we had been working on, that I was carrying, was around missing, murdered Indigenous women's, and Two-Spirits reward fund. And so around this anti-violence work, we had brought forward a bill in our Economic Development Committee for the first time ever. LGBTQ businesses, and there was also for Greater Minnesota and BIPOC owned businesses, supports in the COVID pandemic, in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder. We know that over 50% of our queer owned businesses had shuttered. And so there was these other mechanisms being put into place.
Oh, you don't say. In addition to burning down and specifically targeting the Black-owned businesses in Minneapolis after George Floyd was murdered, the queer-owned businesses also got shut down? Oh, you don't say. It's almost like you guys don't actually care about Black or queer people when you're fucking with people's livelihood, wanting to abolish capitalism.
Because it's about that web of how are we making a Minnesota that is actually going to a place that you could come. We're saying you can come. We're saying that this is going to be a place that's got you.
Wait.
And the big bill that I was...
What? The Ecuador president just declared martial law? Why? What happened in Ecuador? I mean, I'm not like into international stuff or anything, but like, what happened?
Sharing with our youth across the state was around gender inclusive school facilities. And I haven't told this story with anybody in public before, but this is the bill that I was really scared to carry, because when I had put out the homeless youth bill that I had carried to make a cash stipend so that we can end houselessness for youth and get our young folks sheltered, especially our queer and Black and brown youth, there was this horrible, nasty, like hit piece in media and the right wing, and they put my picture.
Wait, is my mic okay? I don't know what happened. Okay, it's good now. Thank you.
Sure. And then it was like me with gobs of money and looking like a creep. And it was awful. And just the messages that I got. And then going in, they did another one on the school facilities bill, which we heard the next day. So imagine we passed Trans Refuge at 5 a.m. and we all had to be back at committee the next day at 8 a.m. I look like a raccoon presenting that bill. And I'm so grateful that we had the chair of education, Cheryl Joachim. We had Representative Sydney Jordan from the Queer Caucus, and we had Lee was there, our Queer Caucus was there. And in a moment where we had just heard testimony after testimony and shared story after story, the next day, everybody stood up after they stayed up all night. They came and they talked about why we need gender inclusive restrooms in our schools. And actually, the leading Republican on the education committee, he was the only one he spoke. And I thought he was going to just like go off. And he said, good design is good design. I'm going to support this bill. And it was like the most anticlimactic moment. But I think because they didn't have any fight left in them. So sometimes you just outrun them.
Yo, this is a great question, honestly. How do we get conservatives to stop taking the TikTok freak show bait? I don't think we can, is the thing. It's like I understand why people like easy kind of clickbait, cringe content. It makes them feel morally superior. They get to own the libs. Like they feel like they're. It's so easy and it's so throwaway. And conservatives, not all conservatives, but a lot of conservatives are so fucking lazy that like I don't. I mean, like honestly, if people have ideas about how to get conservatives to actually look at more nuanced content and to stop like just relying on libs of TikTok as like their only news source when most of that shit is just clickbait. I don't know the answer to this. If anyone has any ideas, like put them out in the chat. But I think it's too deep. It's like the only thing that we can hope to do, and like what I try to do is that like, I mean, like, okay, so one of the reasons I shit on conservatives all the time is not just because it's the truth. We don't always have to say things just because they're true, right? One of the reasons is that I want people to know I am not a conservative. I don't support any of that bullshit. And because people know that about me, they know that like independents can come here, libertarians can come here, disaffected lefties can come here. I have socialists who watch my channel. I have all of this. Hang on 1 second. And so like I want to create a place where like anyone of any political affiliation can come and see what's going on, because I promise you guys there are a lot of Democrats that are not okay with this shit. They just don't know that it's happening. They don't know. It's never presented to them. Or there are a lot of independents or disaffected people or like any of these things that like if they saw this, they would be like, oh shit, this is really much worse than we thought it was. And that's what I want to create, because I think that the only hope we have of actually maybe turning this thing around is if we wake up independents and disaffected lefties. Because when disaffected lefties like me wake up, we get fucking pissed. We get pissed. We get pissed at the people who have subverted like what we thought were good ideas. We get pissed off at the media who's lied to us. We get pissed off at everyone. And like, we know how to fucking get shit done. This is why I'm one of the only people on the internet actually doing fucking journalism around this stuff, because I came from the left. I know how to get shit done. And so it's like, people like me are not afraid to say, all right, what do we need to do? And that's not to say there aren't conservatives who do that. Every once in a while, there's conservatives who do that. But it's like, if we can wake up disaffected lefties and get them activated and show them this bullshit, then that's going to be a much better force than the entire conservative Twitterati. Because all the conservative Twitterati does is talk. That's all they do. They don't take action. They don't look at nuance. They don't want any of that. Literally, all they want is to own the fucking libs and be like, they're all libtards, 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 libtards. It's like, God damn it. So, I don't know how we get the right to stop doing that shit. If there is a solution, I would love to hear it, but I think our time is better spent on waking up independents, libertarians, disaffected lefties, getting those people activated and seeing what can go from there. Oh, hang on. I just got a super chat, I think. Hang on. Thank you, Rottweiler. Marxists taking over institutions, culture, entertainment. Conservatives do the bare minimum. A spicy fucking calendar that isn't even that everyone was fully clothed in. Conservatives lose their fucking minds. Exactly. They went to war with each other over a calendar. There were people blocking each other over a calendar. Like relationships were destroyed over a fucking calendar. But do they do any of the real shit? No. Anyway, we're almost done, guys. We got about 15 minutes left. We are going to cross our fingers. Someone says capitalism. They're so goddamn close. So let's see.
I love that. Just like wore him down to the point where just like, I got nothing. I love that. I'm going to check in with my moderators real quick to see if there's any questions in the chat, and then we'll kind of circle back with any wrap-up final thoughts, futurity things either related to the Trans Refuge Bill or final thoughts in a moment. But Michelle, is there any? Got you. Okay, so there's apparently nothing in the chat so far, but if folks have questions, we might be able to take a couple. So then I'll bring it back. So you mentioned kind of what the Refuge Bill currently covers, what the gist of it is. So I guess kind of a follow-up question of just related to things that are already in place, right? Bills and work that's already been done. What are maybe some, not necessarily limitations, but just like things that you'd like to see kind of in a next phase, right? Like that might build off of the momentum of the policies that have been passed or the bills that have been passed, right? Like what would a next leg of building that momentum look like legislation wise?
I can say that after the Trans Refuge Bill became law, it was to me, so that was like kind of like a triage bill, right? We had states, when we started, there was 11. When we ended, there was 20. There's now like 26 or whatever states that have restricted or banned some level of gender affirming care, right? That work continues to be absolutely necessary. The state of trans rights is an emergency in this country. So that was why we passed Trans Refuge. But I do think that, now what we need to do is sort of, we've done the triage, now we need to do some of the repair, right? Like we need bills, we need data, for example. We have, as a state, our data, we haven't really collected the LGBTQ plus data on any level. And the lack of, my friend Rox says, the lack of data is oppression, right? Because if you do not collect data, you cannot solve a problem. And we really need to start doing that. And we have done some of that in human services, another committee that I'm in, where we just have to start requiring, if you're collecting any data, we got to add these metrics. I know that's like the least sexy answer, right? Like data collection, but it's just so essential to policymaking. We're also, we're going to bring a bill that just will provide small grants to individuals and organizations who are supporting the families who are coming to Minnesota. We know that they're here. There has been a coalition of organizations and healthcare providers who have started to meet and coalesce around how to make sure that we are making good on the promises. If your family uproots, they don't just need gender affirming care. They need housing, they need schools, they need jobs, they need community. It's going to be a lot of work to make sure that there is a soft landing for the people that we have invited here. We need to codify gender affirming care into our actual law. It is not protected by law. It is protected only in the negative, right? We haven't banned it. And I'm very concerned about our Supreme Court. They will eventually hear cases related to us. And I want us to be proactive so that if something were to come down in the future, we know that we would be making good on our promise. I will say that like passing the Trans Refuge Bill was an extremely important and proud moment in my life and in the work that we do. And it keeps me up at night that we are not going to be able to provide what we have said we will provide. I take very seriously the idea that we need to move every year to continue to fulfill that promise, because our community is too traumatized to be fooled. So we need to make good on it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's just in so many realms, work to be done, and it's good work, and we're ready to dig in. I think the data collection is super important. As Black and brown folks, we know that if you're invisible in the data, you're not getting the funding right, you're not getting the investment in policy and the changes, and also we see that that's also need to protect us in the data, as we've seen across the country that there's been databases to try and share trans and gender nonconforming folks. You know, in California, I just saw something out in NBC News that pharmacies and other organizations were sharing that. And so I think that pairing, but we need to collect that. And so we're making those steps in things like Deed with the grants that I mentioned that we did. You know, we're going to have a whole year now of sending those dollars out to queer owned businesses across the state. And we need to dig deeper into those investments. I sit on the Economic Development Committee and the Capital Investments Committees, and those are state dollars that goes to fund public goods that should be accountable and investing in queer-owned spaces, things like our businesses, things like libraries and queer-owned, you know, gathering places that we can continue to enrich and to sustain our culture as queer folks. I think within healthcare, I absolutely agree. There needs to be a lot of work done there around curriculum, whether it's you know, in our schools, in our public schools, on up to our healthcare providers. That I think we have a lot of schools in Minnesota and some of the medical universities who are starting to take those steps, but we need to make sure that our healthcare providers, whether it's pharmacy or it's nursing practitioners or it's family physicians, that they know who we are, that they know the issues, that there is no mistake or you know, it's just an everyday standard of care. You're used to interacting and treating queer folks in those settings, as well as, you know, continue to fight for our culturally responsive care. I know that one of the things is really looking at holistically, like returning to our ceremonial ways. You know, there's a whole process for Two Spirits and indigenous queer folks coming into adulthood, to come into your naming ceremony, to step into your life and to really own all of who you are. And that's going to take what has been I won't say destroyed because it hasn't gone away, but we need help, and it's on the government who created it to make sure that we're helping our communities pick those back up. This year, one of the big things we'll be moving forward is within you know, requiring gender inclusive facilities across Minnesota, because it shouldn't be that, oh, you should live in the cities to be feel thriving as a trans or a queer person. You should be able to live in rural, metro, to the res, and anywhere else in between, and have a good life and thrive.
Sorry, I'm double dipping and trying to make sure I capture comments or questions. So it doesn't, so there was a couple comments that came in that weren't questions, but I just want to share them while we're in the space. So one of the comments was that someone doesn't really have questions, but they're just really appreciative of the time and energy being spent here, and that this person's proud to be a Minnesotan with the two of you at the helm. Is what this question or this comment offers. And then another human said that unfortunately I don't have any questions. All I can just say is that I'm incredibly glad to know that people like y'all are using your political voice to do good for trans people as a young LGBTQ person. So just wanted to share those out. Oh, there's one more really positive comment. Thank you for all the amazing work that you're both doing. Incredible to see representation in the House. You're both an inspiration. So just some hype up from the chat, since we can't exactly see the chat ourselves. So that's some love and vibes from there. So I do want to move us maybe towards like an official wrap up. I think the vibe of kind of where you left off, Leash, kind of was naming some big picture futurity stuff, some additional focuses like I asked. So I just want to make room for any final thoughts, wisdom, words of encouragement, advice for, you know, maybe folks interested in office in the inevitable future, just anything you want to name. The floor is yours to speak on whatever you want to speak on as we put a nice big bow on this and close it out.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy to close it out. You jump in first. I just want to say a big giant Shimigwech, Padamie, for having us and inviting us into your space. It is really humbling to gather with everybody of any place that you could have been. You chose to be here together, and this has just been amazing. I just want to say, like, if you're interested in running for office, if you're interested in getting involved in this work, you're already engaged in the work, and we should be taking our lead from you. Like, we need you. I think we'll have our contact information shared out. I would love to connect, encourage, get you to the Capitol. I know from Greater Minnesota it can be a little tricky making the trek, but there's ways that we can either get connected remotely, have you down there, or bring the Capitol out to community to meet you where you're at. And, you know, the biggest thing that I think I just want to leave you with is that we are the people who are the original healers, right? Like trans and queer folks, that we are the storytellers and the culture bearers. And this world can feel a little heavy at times, a lot heavy at times. And so I just encourage you to continue to lean into those words that my elder would whisper to me, that Gego Wendo Wen Kayon, like, don't you ever give up. We need you. We know that we want our babies, our queer babies, to turn into queer adults, into queer elders, into transcestors, and go back into the star world. And so don't ever forget that inside of you is star and fire power, and you're incandescent and radiant and beautiful. And I'm super grateful to be in this work with you. And so please don't ever hesitate to reach out, and let's keep connecting.
Yeah. I mean, it feels kind of like, why say anything more? You know, that's it. That's everything. I'll just add,
Boo.
Please do reach out. Please do.
We didn't get our capitalism orgasm today. Oh, well, that's all right.
It's hard.
That's
it's hard
all right.
work, but it's full of joy and
so close
power and wonderfulness. And I'm so grateful. Like, every day, I'm so grateful for Leash and the partnership that we have formed, and our ability to do this work. And, you know, those connections are just like, they're existing everywhere, and they're waiting for everyone to step forward into these roles and to build those connections to be able to change the world. You know, I mean, being trans is a great joy and a great power. And right now we need people who are trans and non-binary and two-spirit and gender expansive to step into that power and claim it, because people are dying, and we can do it. We can have fun doing it. We can find meaning doing it, but it is really necessary. So thank you, RB, for gathering us here. Thank you, Leash, for everything that you say every day. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the future.
I love closing on a warm, fuzzy note. That makes me so happy. So yeah, thanks again so much for holding space, sharing space, your time, your wisdom, your culture, your everything. It's very evident that just you both lead with and legislate with, like, love of community, like, as the guiding star on what you're doing. And that's just really incredible and inspiring, and just, like, so refreshing, I think, and just this, you know, clustery, interesting life that we're living together in this current time. appreciation to folks who tuned in for this session as well. I have no concept of how many or who you are from currently where I'm sitting, because I'm not looking at the chat, but we're talking into the void. It's been a great, time hanging out with Leash and Lee here. This was recorded, so if folks want to check back into this video later, you want to revisit something,
all right, I was holding out hope that there might be a capitalism at the very end and the crowd would burst into like I don't know, like I don't know what you like, they edged us so hard, the explosion would have been epic. But sadly, it looks like we are going to walk away frustrated from tonight's stream. Women are used to this. We don't always get our... That's all right. That's all right. There's always next time. All right, guys, that is all I have for right now. I'm going to go do some write-ups for the Substack of some things we've been finding. As a reminder, if you want to support the work I'm doing and get access to the community Zoom call that we are doing tomorrow at noon, because we do them on Mondays at 7 p.m. and we do them on Wednesdays at noon, head over to the Actively Unwoke Substack, which is Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. And if you click on this Unwoke Roundup, the one that says find supporter perks and Zoom and Discord links here, and you scroll all the way down the bottom, underneath this red box for paid supporters, you will find a Zoom link for tomorrow's Zoom call, which is going to be from noon till round about 3 o'clock, where it's private, unrecorded. You can come in, talk about whatever you want to talk about. We are also doing Bitchcraft on Saturday at 3 p.m. Bitchcraft is an open Zoom where we bitch and we craft. I, of course, will be knitting as the far most superior of all crafts, but all crafts are welcomed, or you can just come and hang out. We will be doing movie night on Sunday with Jennifer. We're watching some sort of sci-fi movie, I think, that like some sort of B movie that Jennifer feels really confident about. It's Jennifer January, so Jennifer gets to pick out all the movies. And so we do movie nights on Sunday in the supporter Discord. On Thursday, there's writers group in the supporter Discord. You get access to all those perks. And you even get 10% off in the Unwoke Art Store when you become a supporter of my work on Substack, because I'm completely 100% grassroots funded by you, and I can't do it without you. And I'm doing some original journalism tonight because we infiltrated a training this morning sponsored by the Washington, D.C. mayor, and I've already got fire that's been released. So I'm going to go do some more of that now. As a reminder, we will not be doing Nothing Remotely Controversial tonight because Joshua has something else he needs to do. We apologize for the late cancellation. It is what it is. Everyone's fine. It's just something that needs to be done. So yeah, that's all I've got for right now, guys. I will see you tomorrow. Take care. Have a good